The film begins by showing a girl named Kharis, who is forced to go home on foot after her car's radiator breaks down. She has just returned from expressing her arguments at the band council meeting, and she asks her mother to pick her up on the street. In the meantime, Kharis is being followed by a mysterious car, which refuses to provide her with a ride when she signals for one. At first, the car slowly follows her, but once it realizes that Kharis is trying to run away, the car starts to accelerate towards her. The scene then switches to the following day at the house of a female officer named Betty, where the police officer leaves alone with her nephew named Ben. Betty then receives a phone call from a colleague named Andy. At this moment, Andy informs her that Kharis' mother, Mary Lynn, has arrived to the shed to see her daughter's body. We then move to an indigenous ranger woman named Stacy. She is out hunting for animals on her own, and she suddenly comes across a bear trap in the forest. Therefore, she takes the trap because she is worried that it will be stepped on by human feet. We return to Betty, who has arrived at the shed. She invites the victim's mother to come in and certify the dead body. And when the body bag is opened, Mary finds it difficult to accept that the corpse is in fact that of her own daughter, Kharis. Mary says that her daughter had been through a lot, but she doesn't understand why that it had to end in this way. Long story short, the scene switches to a pair of fiancés who are visiting a land, where their camp center will be built with the approval of the local band council. The man named Ray, and his fiancée, Beth. It turns out that Ray is simply accompanying Beth, as she conducts a survey of the land that will be tilled. While working on their survey, Beth notices a crow flying above them and detects a terrible smell that smells like carrion. She then tries to ask Ray about it, but Ray doesn't smell anything. Beth then notices what appears to be a wave passing through her measuring device. Not sure what it is, but Beth is suddenly attacked by something that cannot be seen. A few moments later, Betty and Andy rush to the scene after receiving the report. Andy then explains that Beth is employed by WEC, an organization that is planning to build a camp center in the indigenous territory. When Betty asks Ray for information, he claims that he hasn't seen anyone attack his fiancée, which makes Betty feel strange. According to Ray, Beth died after smelling something that smelled like blood around the area. The following day, the scene returns to Stacy, who is having her lunch at a cafe. At the same time, there is a perverted man named Donnie who is intently observing her looks. A woman named Frances then approaches her, and says that she has been quite busy at the shed recently as the ice road has thickened all around the area. Shortly after, Stacy, who wants to return to her car, realizes that her car has been blocked by Donnie. Donnie then attempts to entice Stacy by giving her a t-shirt that shows he is one of the people who supports the WEC organization. Moreover, instead of moving the car, Donnie asks for Stacy's phone number, which makes her feel irritated. Stacy then pretends to take a pen and immediately hits Donnie in the face, causing his nose to bleed. The scene then switches to a couple named Jessica and Gary. While they're talking about their hunting activities, Gary suddenly notices a strange smell, and they hear something walking on top of his car.
I don't smell anything.
Gary bet that it is a wolf, so he takes out his rifle to check it out.
Here's my chance. I'm getting one.
Gary?
The moment Jessica sees her boyfriend's intestines pulled out, she freaks out and closes the car door right away. Soon after, Betty and Andy come to the scene, and Betty begins questioning Jessica about the incident. Betty is quite surprised when Jessica mentions the death, which sounds eerily similar to the previous death incident she dealt with. According to Jessica, she didn't see or smell anything like what Gary claims. Meanwhile, Stacy is hunting rabbits in the forest, and soon she is surprised by the arrival of Betty. Betty then wants to make her a deputy, and asks her to join in the investigation of mysterious murder cases that occur in their local area. Stacy initially refuses, but because she is the only person skilled in tracking there, she has to accept Betty's request. They then proceed to the shed, and begin to examine the condition of the corpse, which looks terrible. From the wounds Stacy observes, she believes that they were caused by an attack from a hunting beast. As they are about to leave, Betty notices the strange chain Francis is wearing. Betty also feels weird when she sees Francis doing something strange in the shed. After that, Stacy goes to meet her uncle and informs him about the beast that is now terrorizing the townspeople. When Carson hears this, he rushes out with equipment and weapons to assist his niece in her investigation. Betty, on the other hand, is currently engaged in an investigation into the spirituality of the indigenous people in the area. She then finds a photo of Francis who turns out has something to do with the spiritual activity. Meanwhile, Stacy and her father begin to walk through every path in the forest. They then start putting a bait of animal flesh to lure the beast out. But suddenly, they finally know that it wasn't an animal who did all of this, but a terrifying demon that is difficult to deal with. Seeing her father is severely injured, Stacy immediately takes him to the hospital. Carson is now undergoing an emergency treatment at the hospital, and they are visited by Betty as well. At this point, Stacy explains that what they are dealing with is not a wild animal, but rather a demonic figure who looks like the previous hit-and-run victim named Kharis. Betty, who previously did not believe in such things, now believes that this tragedy has something to do with the spirit. Short time later, Andy arrives to find out about the incident. He is now asserting that the perpetrators of all this are people who are hiding in the inland. In fact, these people are doing this because they have been influenced by evil spirits, and he believes these people are a bunch of hysterics. Stacy and Betty simply accept what Andy says, since he won't believe the truth behind all of these. Following that, Carson then asks if any of Kharis' organs, including her heart, are still in her dead body, as if he understands what's going on. The scene then switches to Frances, who is visiting the site of Kharis' death, and she's suddenly approached by Mary. They then tell each other about the good things that Kharis had done throughout his life. Strangely, at the end of their conversation, Frances hears the sound of a strong wind blowing.
What's happening?
The following day, Beth is seen busy looking for clues to every murder case in her town. And Betty finally begins to see a bright spot, where she realizes the clothes worn by the victims are from the same organization, which is the mining organization, WEC. Plus, their partners who had nothing to do with the organization were not injured. She also comes across articles claiming that the local band council had sold licenses to WEC without approval. She then finds an article about how active Kharis is as an activist while she is still alive. After that, Betty asks about the video project of her nephew's meeting on land mining. It is revealed here that Carson is actually one of the people who supported the mining project. This is because they can take this opportunity to build their community based on what the company has promised them. Mary and Kharis, on the other hand, are opposed to it all because it threatens the ecosystem, which includes forests and rivers. In the evening, Betty comes to the shed and inquires about Kharis' body, but Frances informs her that the body has been moved to a new morgue. Betty, who is not satisfied with the answer, keeps pressing Frances for all the transportation record, but Frances continues to make excuses. After being pressed by Betty, Frances finally tells the truth and informs Betty to meet Mary Lynn, the person who took the body. The next day, Betty meets Stacy, and explains that all the dead persons are the workers for the mining organization that will start their project in this area. Betty then provides evidence that her uncle is also one of the people who support the organization's movement, which explains why he's being attacked by the spirit. After that, they meet Andy, who has just caught Donnie. Donnie is arrested after accidentally shot a deaf old woman, who is walking in the bush. He thought the elderly woman is a murderer who was terrorizing the neighborhood. Andy then goes to a cafe, where he tells Frances that he saw her at the site of Kharis' death. Frances then explains that she was only paying her respects to Kharis. At first, Frances appears to be hiding something, but after reminiscing about Kharis' efforts in protecting nature, she finally makes a confession. She also notices Donnie, who had been arrested first. It is at this point where she begins to admit that Donnie is the one who had hit Kharis. Plus, she explains that Donnie asked her out at that time, but she was given drugs so that she became semi-conscious when Donnie carried out his act. Back to Stacy and Betty, they will now meet Kharis' mother. Betty then inquires about the whereabouts of Kharis' body, but instead, Mary informs that Kharis' corpse had been taken by her ancestral spirits. At this point, Mary begins to show her hatred towards WEC, who wanted to take everything from them, including their indigenous land. After seeing Mary's flighty emotions, they decide to leave her alone. On their way to the car, Betty's nephew calls her and says that the mining organization is starting to offer job opportunities. Even though Betty forbids him from going to the place, Ben still insists on applying for a job at WEC. As Stacy and Betty are about to leave, Stacy seems to think of something. She then returns to Mary and begins to tell her the story of her colleague, who is closely related to Mary's story. She also tries to convince Mary that what she is doing is not right. Although the intention to protect the territory is good, but killing by any means is wrong. Stacy then gives the amulet that her friend had given to Mary. On the other side, as Ben is on his way to apply for the job, Betty again warns him to stay away from anything related to WEC. Then suddenly, Ben, who is panicked, immediately runs away as fast as he can. Fortunately, he manages to get into his house and survives the pursuit of the demon Kharis, who doesn't like his intention to work for the organization. Not long after, Betty arrives at her house, and immediately goes right to the basement to rescue Ben. Betty manages to get into the room and survive the pursuit of Kharis. Shortly after, Stacy arrives at Betty's house as well, and armed with her rifle, she intends to put an end to it all. In the midst of a panic, she tries to find Betty, and when the demon Kharis attempts to break down the door, Stacy distracts her by showing the t-shirt with the WEC logo Donnie gave her. After that, Stacy lures Kharis out of the house. As she had planned, Kharis gets caught in a bear trap set by her. Stacy and Betty then strafe Kharis with their weapons. But the result is not as what they had hoped, since Kharis is no longer a human. In a state of panic, Stacy tries to take an axe to end the spirit's existence, but suddenly, Kharis manages to escape from the trap and hurt Betty. In the end, Stacy and Betty start to feel confused about what to do. Meanwhile, Mary, who has realized her wrongdoing, finally decides to put an end to all this by performing a ritual, in which she will burn Kharis' heart to paralyze her daughter's demon. Just in a matter of seconds, the demon Kharis is losing her strength. So Stacy doesn't want to waste time after seeing the opportunity, where she finally succeeds in beheading the head of the demon Kharis. The scene then shifts back to Mary, who is now being visited by Francis. Francis asks Mary if it is all over, and Mary answers that it is almost over. In addition, she says that they can only say her name one more time to summon her spirit, and they will never be able to do so again. Back to Stacy and Betty. Andy then arrives on the scene and informs Betty and Stacy that he has arrested the individual responsible for Kharis' death. But without Andy knowing it, he has mentioned Kharis' name in his explanation. And in the end, Kharis' spirit rises for the last time and begins attacking Donnie, the one who was supposed to die from the beginning. And with that, the film ends. To make it short, the mining company has always wanted to control the lands of the Native Americans in the area. However, activists in the area do not agree if the land is converted into mining, which will certainly damage the ecosystem and environment. The land is a legacy of the indigenous ancestors who once lived on it, where Kharis and his mother are one of the most active community activists in the area. Unfortunately, on that fateful night, Donnie, the culprit and apologist for the organization, carried out his dirty work by crashing Kharis to death. As a result, the mother refuses to accept this and performs a black ritual for her family lineage, in which Kharis can be summoned by calling her name as mentioned at the end of the film. By taking the body and heart of Kharis, She transforms into a demonic figure who will continue to assassinate those who are associated with the organization. But at the end of the story, Kharis' mother is awakened by Stacy, so that in the end she decides to end what she has started.